The same thing is happening with your kid. Make this an environment where, oh, that's interesting. You were in school today and the substitute teacher went up to the board and they wrote they/them on the board and they introduced themselves as non-binary and then asked to take questions, which is a scenario that literally happened in my city, in a red city, in a red state. And then, just kind of get a sense of where your kid's at. Your kid might be like, yeah, I just thought it was weird. Like, why would a singular person describe themselves as multiple people? And you could say, yeah, that is weird. Well, why do you think that's weird? Why do you think that they said that? What do you think is behind that? And then just see how you can extrapolate that out. But everything has to come back to a gospel conversation about the fact that we are all depraved, broken sinners. We all just have different flavors of brokenness. Some people's brokenness is that they have dove headlong into gender ideology and they've bought the line, hook, line, and sinker that they are somehow in the wrong body, as if that has any, relation to reality whatsoever. But again, you can't assume what your kid believes about something just because you hear about the something that they heard. You have your lens through which you have lived your life and how you've gotten to your age, and they have theirs. It's not nearly as advanced and doesn't have nearly as many inputs, but you need to understand what you're up against before you start fighting.
Asking kids questions is one of the best ways. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that parents make is they talk to their kids or they talk at their kids instead of having a conversation with their kids. I'm from a sales background as well, and in the business that I'm in, I have to work with specific clients who have to put sales mechanisms in place, and that's what I always tell people is if you're not asking more questions than you're giving information, you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
And obviously we're not selling our kids, but we have to seek first to understand how they're thinking and how they're perceiving and what those inputs look like to them before we can even have a conversation with them. Because if we're just telling them things and it doesn't go through the lens of how they're seeing it, then it doesn't make sense to them.
Well, and Eric, if I may, I know the point you were making, but I do think that we are selling to our children. Like right now, my kids are 4 and 2, so I'm basically using sign language to communicate with them, right? Because they're essentially chimps. But as they do get older, you are selling a worldview to them. You are selling to them, why is a judeo-christian ethic, or a specifically Christian ethic, why is the gospel, why is that the lens through which we should view the world and not the lens of an atheist or an agnostic or a left-wing radical Marxist or an Islamist or a Muslim or a Sikh or a Buddhist or a Hindu? Or you're selling to them why this worldview is the worldview that they need to operate based on. Years ago, there was a buddy of mine that was somewhere between atheist and agnostic, and he was curious about Christianity. And so I got the book, A Reason for Faith, by Tim Keller. And we just started working through it. Once a week we would go out to lunch and we were working through chapters at a time, and we get to the end of it. I'm like, okay, where are you at on all this? And he's like, yeah, I just really appreciate you taking me through all of this. And I'm like, so where are you at on the person of Jesus? And he goes, man, to be honest, I don't really know, but I'm really glad you took all the time with me. Now I feel like I need to find the same person to do this with me as it pertains to Islam and as it pertains to Buddhism and as it pertains to all these other different religions. And I said, hey, I understand where you could come to that conclusion, but I can save you a little bit of time. If you believe that a Middle Eastern Jewish construction worker in his early 30s died on a Roman cross at the behest of the Jewish Sanhedrin, was placed into a stranger's tomb, and 3 days later walked out of that tomb, and that somehow counted for you, then I can save you the rest of your time. That doesn't mean you shouldn't discuss comparative religion or understand what other religions believe, but that's kind of a cheat code. Because if you believe in that story, then you believe in the gospel, which means that you believe that the only way you can be counted as righteous before a holy and just God is through accepting the sacrifice of his son on the cross for our sins. But if you don't believe that, have at it. Go for it. Have fun. Like, do all the research you want, but just know that no matter how you circle the drain, it always comes back to the same thing, which is, who is the person of Jesus to you?